Hi.
Hello, hello.
We're off to a great start. I'm Shana Meyerson with the Yoga of War podcast, here today with pro-Israel activist and my personal friend, Dillon Hosier. If you appreciate and find value in these important discussions, please consider supporting the show. Your donations ensure that I can continue to bring you such amazing and esteemed guests. Details are pinned in the comments below. So, remember school? That place where you learn to ask questions and critically think? Yeah, that place. It's gone. Gone and replaced with a new agenda, not of teaching and learning, but of programming and indoctrination. Our American children are no longer encouraged to think for themselves, but to groupthink, according to the intersectional ideology of an educational hierarchy that is largely controlled by the anti-American and profoundly anti-Semitic Red-Green Alliance. Today, Dillon and I will be discussing the dangers of an educational system that no longer serves its students, but instead its own dangerous agenda. First, I'm going to move the camera and tiny them out. Much better.
That's much better.
Dillon Hosier is the Chief Executive Officer at the Israeli-American Civil Action Network, an organization dedicated to bringing together Israeli-American activists with pro-Israel Americans in the United States and engaging in key policy and legislative initiatives at all levels of government. Dillon has successfully lobbied for state-level Iran sanctions and anti-BDS legislation, and previously served for a decade as the political officer at the Israeli consulate in Los Angeles, supporting and strengthening the relationship between Israel and the United States. Dillon, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. Yeah, it's great to be
We've
here.
had these discussions in private, so I'm excited to bring today's conversation into the public realm.
Ask me
YouTube
anything.
Live.
Ask me anything. Be tough.
Well, we're on the same team here, so I don't know how tough it's going to be. Unfortunately, on the show, I really only bring on allies. Some people are willing to bring on the haters. My problem is that I can't argue with people who only argue with lies and propaganda. So
Agreed. Understood.
It's hard to, and we're going to actually touch upon that very concept later in the discussion. But before we start, for anyone who might not be familiar with you, could you just tell us a bit about your background and how ICANN specifically came into being?
Sure. So I grew up here in Southern California. We're in Los Angeles now. Proud graduate of LAUSD public schools. Actually, that's the Los Angeles Unified School District. By the way, do I look at you or should I look at the camera?
Look wherever you want.
I'll look at the viewers if you don't mind. I don't want to be rude to you.
All good.
So I grew up in the Valley and San Fernando Valley. And by the way, I'm not Jewish either. So I think for those of us who are in this space and who are not Jewish, I wish there were more of us. But for those who care, I'm actually not Jewish. Which I think actually gives me a interesting perspective on some of the challenges that we see within the Jewish community, within the community of people who care about the U.S.-Israel relationship, by the way, which is a community that is much larger than the Jewish community, including people like me who are not Jewish or who are not really religious at all. So I come at this work kind of with that background. As you said, I served for a decade at the Israeli consulate in Los Angeles, working primarily on Iran sanctions legislation, focused especially on the state and local level. We did some federal engagement, but really helped to educate state and local officials about the threat of a nuclear Iran and of the ability for different jurisdictions, like, for example, here in Los Angeles, the Police and Fire Pension Fund divested from any company doing business in Iran's energy sector. So that's that was a huge hundreds of millions of dollars out of Iran's energy sector. state of California has three pieces of legislation, one policy about sanctioning Iran. That's the most comprehensive coverage out of any state in the country other than Florida,
Wow.
which has the same. So there are a lot of things at the state and local level we can do with regards to these issues that I'm proud to have worked on and worked in. I also was the architect and co-author of the California MOU with Israel. So this was the first time that the state of California actually went and created a partnership with an entire country, not just a Ministry of Trade or
Right.
Ministry of Economic Development and that kind of thing. So very proud of those agreements, and now looking to extend that success via the local communities, actually. So one of the things that you learn in government while serving in that position at the consulate is that, yes, diplomats and ministers and things are amazing resources. But the thing I learned now working in the nonprofit sector is that grassroots communities can be incredibly powerful, especially when we're talking about creating change at the electoral level or during election season. So that's kind of a little bit of my background. And here at ICANN, we are focused on two things. One is bringing together Israelis and Americans like me to fight for pro-Israel policy and doing that primarily at the state and local level. So that is what ICANN is. I'm very proud of what we've been able to accomplish with very little funding, by the way. If anybody who's watching wants to help fund us, you can learn more at israelusa.org. But we're I think, looking to kind of be that. We need an APAC, by the way. I know you'll talk about this, but we need an APAC that works the state and local level, and that is a gap that we're looking to fill. So that's kind of us in a quick nutshell.
And you actually are filling. So
And
there's
we are
that.
filling, I hope so. Yes, I would like to think so.
Yeah, and ICANN is in the show notes, so you could find the link there to find out more about the organization and also how you can donate to support Dillon's work. So, sort of touching upon what you mentioned in the beginning, because it is so important. I mean, Dillon, Israel and the Jewish people have been blessed with some incredible non-Jewish allies who really recognize the moral imperative of this moment. But for you, it's so much bigger. You have dedicated your life for the last couple decades to the U.S.-Israel alliance. This isn't a reaction to October 7th, though that did change the game. Why? Why are you so committed? Is it because of religion? Is it because what compelled you to dive in this deep?
Compels. It's a compulsion. I still feel.
Yeah.
So honestly, if you look at the world, the United States, I believe, to use a metaphor, is a shining city on a hill. I think Israel is that other shining city on a hill. In my opinion, for Western civilization to survive, both countries need to be strong and cooperative, and they need to lead the way. I think what we saw this past week with Trump and his leadership in the Middle East, this is a phenomenal example of, again, those two shining cities on a hill working together to create peace in the world and to hopefully solve some major issues. So for me, that's what drives me. My family came here, I'm proud to say, in the 1630s to the United States. They
I
landed.
thought you said to California. I'm
Not to
I don't even know anybody who's more than one generation.
Yeah, not to California. I'm the first generation Californian. But,
yeah.
But came to landed in Massachusetts in 1630.
Wow.
I actually have my great-great-great-grandfather's Civil War discharge papers that we physically have them.
That is amazing.
back at the family house back east. So I love this country, and I think that in order for this country to survive, the state of Israel must survive. It's a small country. It is a huge light unto the world, and I think that again, in order for I shouldn't even say Western civilization. There's only one kind of civilization that is Western civilization. So in order for us to survive as a liberal democracy, I think that relationship is important to me. So that's why I fight that fight. And again, as a non-Jew, looking at these issues, I have seen such remarkable double standards. And that, to me, again, if we love our country and we want to be a nation of laws, we cannot have a collection of civil rights laws, for example, that apply one way to one set of people and another way to another set of people. And again, as a non-Jew looking from the outside in, sort of, I have seen way too many double standards to be comfortable with. And that to me shows a fraying or an erosion of American exceptionalism.
And that's going to be the topic towards the end of our show, actually. So please stick around, because the exceptionalism issue is a very important issue. But I want to backtrack to something else you said, which honestly is completely irrelevant to today's conversation, but important to the overall conversation, which is that we're seeing a movement in two directions. One is in the direction as you're doing, which is to say allyship, and the other, we see it between the president and the vice president specifically, is towards isolationism. So how would you explain to people why, even if America first, and we're America, it should be America first, why even if America first is allyship with Israel, or even obviously broadening that scope to other nations, but why is allyship, and you could speak specifically to the U.S.-Israel relationship, so important?
So I think you're hitting on, and I don't know if the question is getting at, but we have this issue on the right, the kind of the right side of the political spectrum, where there is this kind of isolationism brewing. We're seeing, I think, some examples of members of Congress and former members of Congress like Marjorie Taylor Greene and Matt Gaetz, who frankly are just, in my opinion, grifters. I don't know if they're getting Qatari money or what is funding their behavior, their position, but it's a little strange to see that. So number one, I'll say that from my standpoint, in my opinion, isolationism is not a foreign policy, right? I mean, it's not a coherent foreign policy. Especially when we know that we've got radical jihadist groups around the world that are looking to infiltrate Western society, especially the United States, using drug cartels and other international organizations to infiltrate the West. So again, isolationism, I just don't think makes sense from a foreign policy perspective. We have to project power, and we have to project leadership. We can't build a wall around the United States, in that regard at least. As it relates to the alliance specifically with the State of Israel, I think that there are many direct benefits that come from that relationship. Intelligence sharing, technology sharing, really giving us perspective on an important place and region in the world. So there are many practical benefits to that relationship, and I think that again, whatever kind of foreign policy you prefer, that alliance yields extraordinary benefit, especially for what we invest in it. We get an excellent return.
Yeah, and that also includes military tech. We've got the Golden Dome on its way, which is a direct descendant of the Iron Dome.
Correct.
And also having done the MOU with California, water tech.
Water.
Israel is, though they've been in drought for something like 100 years, is net positive in actually exporting water because of their water and agricultural tech, not to mention medical tech, and all the tech that you can name. Okay, thank you for that. So honestly, Dillon, our focus today is going to be on K-12 education, and more specifically, ethnic studies. Okay. Particularly in California. So we are the canary in the coal mine, the epicenter of insanity, and the place that we both affectionately call home. With all the issues surrounding the U.S. and Israel alliance today, what is it about ethnic studies that has made you all but shift your entire focus on this one issue?
Wow, that's actually a huge question.
That's okay. We've got lots of time.
So first of all, let me ask you a question back, which is, what do you think ethnic studies is? Let's help the viewers understand what ethnic studies actually is. But tell me what you think it is. Yes,
and that was that's actually gonna be my next. So here's the reason why I don't want to get too much into it. Besides the fact that it's my next question, but also because for anybody who's listening, I did a deep dive on this with Brandy Shufutinsky.
Oh, right. Yes.
And
yes.
I don't want to repeat that information because today I want to deal more with
Brandy's
the ramifications.
The best. Watch that episode. If you're watching this, go back and watch that now. It's fun. She's the best.
She's so articulate.
Yeah.
She's so concise. And I have to say, it's one of the most concise and informative episodes that I've had on the show. So I want to sort of refer people to that for that. But for right now, could you just give sort of a high level explanation of ethnic studies because it sounds so noble, but it's really so nefarious.
It's totally a Trojan horse. It's 100% a Trojan horse.
Yeah.
So ask the question again. Remind me what the question was.
I just want you to give sort of, again, I have the deep dive with Brandy. Yep. So just like a high level.
Why we shifted our focus to that.
Oh, that was the previous question. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
Sorry. Okay. Why did you shift your focus? And then let's talk briefly about what ethnic studies is. And you could combine if you want.
So I think shifting focus, I think that's an incredibly important question because it is something that, first of all, took a lot of thought. Mm-hmm. It took a lot of reflection and consideration around what my area of expertise is as a policy professional versus where we need to focus our attention. And I should give you a hint as to kind of where this is going. But so again, if my background is primarily in international issues, like I said, connecting state of California and Israel, Iran sanctions, all this kind of. So the question is, why would we shift to something that when we as an organization, and by the way, as an organization, we have led on things like anti-BDS measures, as well as anti-hate measures, hate crime statutes, those kinds of things. So then you go, well, why look at ethnic studies, which is a subset of like K through 12 policies? And the answer is because that is the vector, that is the entry point into which there is so much radical content coming into the classroom. And then if you add to that, and this is a huge point that I want to leave people with today, if you take any point, it should be the following, which is that schools, school boards, teachers, and the whole ecosystem around public education, K through 12 public education, is being hijacked by activists who are using their role as teachers to indoctrinate K through 12 students, typically using ethnic studies as a vehicle for that, or as the material for that, the substance for that, while simultaneously running for public office, while running for school board or running, and then when they go to school board, they get city council, then they go to Congress or state legislature. So the schools, not just the content of ethnic studies itself, but the personnel and the people who are operating within that ecosystem are I shouldn't say primarily, but are significantly using that venue for partisan political purposes. So that's why we have shifted our focus so much to the K through 12 space, specifically looking at ethnic studies as well.
Okay. And could you just give us like the Cliff Notes version of what is ethnic studies? It sounds like such a nice, fluffy, pretty, effort.
Yeah. So, and by the way, if you look on ICANN's YouTube channel, we've done a deep dive also into the genesis and origin of ethnic studies. So ethnic studies sounds like, that you're going to study the cultures and the rich tapestry of beauty of like LA, for example. In Los Angeles, we have so many different cultures, so many different people here from different countries. Yeah. That is not at all what ethnic studies is. Ethnic studies is essentially a ideologically driven area of education that, when I say ideological, it is one kind of ideology. It's anti-capitalist. It's pro-climate change and environment at all costs in its anti-capitalism. It is, by the way, there are so many strange words and jargon that are included in this program. But if you go to the other podcast with Brandy Shufutinsky, you'll see it. But essentially, it's an ideologically driven area of study that is masked and wrapped in this veneer of, we're going to learn each other's stories. That is the biggest lie of ethnic studies, was we're going to learn each other's stories. We're not. We're going to learn how to hate America, essentially, is what ethnic studies is.
Okay, let's not mince words.
That's essentially really what it is.
So, okay, let's get into this, because the real reason why you're on my show today is not really just the breadth of ethnic studies, but specifically that it is and has been proven to be extremely anti-Semitic, anti-Zionist, and definitely anti-Israel. So before we really get into sort of the legislation and the ramifications, could you give me some specific examples of anti-Semitism, anti-Zionism, anti-Israel rhetoric that's embedded in some of these curricula?
Yeah, so first of all, I want people to understand that this policy is largely being implemented and imposed at the state level, and to a certain extent at the local level as well. So it's important for people to understand that, because there are other states. You mentioned the California as the canary in the coal mine. I would call California like the domino that it makes all other dominoes fall over.
Sure.
There are other dominoes, though, prior to California that are actually farther along. Two of them are Minnesota and Oregon, actually, as it comes.
Okay.
Now, Massachusetts is tough as it relates to anti-Semitism in general. But as it relates to ethnic studies in particular, they're very advanced in pushing that policy along. So California, though, they had a draft version of their curriculum that had this pro-BDS. Actually, had it looks like it was written by Hamas. It could have been written by Hamas. It was pro-BDS, pro-terror, pro-whatever. So it was pretty extreme. What we're seeing now with the current implementation of ethnic studies in California public schools is something a little more subtle, and especially since 10/7, Free Palestine. They'll show only one side of what's going on in Gaza, and usually it's the propaganda piece that is shown on Al Jazeera, not reality. So today it's a little bit more insidious, but I want people to understand that the initial draft that came out for California was so bad, even the LA Times condemned it. I mean, and that was before the LA Times tried to be normal. So even when it was still extreme, before Patrick Soon-Shiong tried to turn it around, even the LA Times condemned that draft. So some teachers are still trying to sneak some of that, what's called liberated in. But it's stuff like in Massachusetts, you saw a dollar bill folded like a Star of David. Yeah. Again, blatantly pro-Hamas, pro-Palestinian terrorist materials, the kind of thing that we're seeing in ethnic studies. That's anti-Semitic.
Yep.
And anti-Israel, frankly, and it's just radical and extreme.
Yeah. And also referring to Israel as Israel and the occupied Palestinian territories or whatever. The occupied, they call it Israel and occupied Palestine.
Correct.
Because in America, we don't recognize the state of Palestine, and the word occupied is loaded, and it also separates. It separates as if they're Judea and Samaria are a separate entity.
Well, and I would go further than that and to say that.
Excuse me.
Sorry, while you're coughing, I would go further than that and say that actually. Proponents of this, it's not just that they separate Judea and Samaria, and these are disputed territories, right? They use the term occupied, but the real legal definition is disputed. A lot of these teachers don't think Israel exists at all. There's this sense of it's a fake country that's only been around for less than 80 years. Someday we will be able to restore ancient Palestine. It's an activist fantasy that they're bringing into public school classrooms. California, and by the way, if California goes the direction of the way policymakers want it to go, it will be dangerous not just for California public schools, but for all public schools in the country. Because again, as California goes, so goes the country. And this is an incredibly dangerous area of study, ethnic studies.
Yeah, it definitely is. And just to touch upon the concept of double standards in countries that have only been around for 80 years, go down the litany and ask how many of them they think are illegitimate.
Correct.
But the fantasy of Palestine, knowing that Palestine was a convention created to denote the land of the Jews. And that was only hijacked by Arafat in the 60s. And before that, there was no Palestinian identity other than Jews.
Yep.
But I digress. So I want to go back to something else you said, which is you talked about the diversity of viewpoints. And so many people who oppose this current climate of indoctrination, meaning our side, argue we need a diversity of viewpoints so kids can process all sides of an argument and start to think for themselves to arrive at conclusion. I personally have a problem with the side that is Western, that is moral, that is against terror, being left in a place where we have to say, oh no, we have to listen to all sides. I mean, does this diversity of viewpoints mean that teachers will objectively and innocuously offer the perspectives of Al-Qaeda when teaching 9/11, or ISIS when teaching the war on terror, or the good one, Hitler when teaching the Holocaust, just so kids can chew on these huge chunks of cud and decide what they believe from there? This is a false flag, just like free speech.
Right. Well, so you've touched on a kind of a little bit of a different area of education policy, which is controversial viewpoints in the classroom. And there is supposed to be a board level policies that happen at the district level. So LA Unified School District or Long Beach or Oakland, whatever the different district is, each of them have policies as it relates to how to address controversial topics in the classroom. Mm-hmm. And it's as they seek to put these policies in the classroom and to implement these standards fairly, it is unclear mm-hmm, exactly mm-hmm. what that means based off of what you just said, and especially in terms of promoting terrorist-like policies. So we will need to see. This is something that's kind of up in the air. And actually, in the state of California, a new piece of legislation was just passed. It was signed into law by Newsom, which is supposed to touch on some of these issues of how to address controversial topics, how to deliver factually accurate instruction in the classroom. And by the way, the biggest problem that the teachers' unions had was with this term in the law of factually accurate. They were nervous about that. So. It's unclear exactly how, as we enter in this new kind of radical phase of classroom instruction, how you will address that and not promote fringe radical ideology while also adhering to the standards of controversial topics in education. So we'll have to see.
The fact that the words factually accurate are controversial
correct
tells the whole story.
Yes, exactly.
This is the same issue we have in the media. Gone are the days where news is reported, and now what pretends to be news is all commentary.
Right.
And so our schools, what pretends to be ethnic studies is radical indoctrination.
Correct. It's literally like if you were to go join DSA or in like an Antifa-like group or mm-hmm. that kind of organization. This is the same kind of language, jargon, rhetoric, policy, by the way. There are policy implications to and this is K through 12. This is K through 12. So for example, when we talk about ethnic studies and what would it mean to teach ethnic studies in third grade, for example, mm-hmm. what they're trying to do, and they're going to try to do this in 2026. This is the big fight for the coming legislative session, is to, for example, in third grade, you'll learn about geography, you'll learn about mountains and oceans and whatever, but you'll learn about it through the lens of the patriarchy or through white supremacy or through other forms of oppressor and oppressed type narratives. So that's a big problem that we're going to have in the coming years, I would say.
And oppressor, oppressed are the keywords that we didn't mention when it comes to ethnic studies. That's pretty much what it all comes down to. And the fact that we're seeing this creep into things like geography, things like math equations.
Correct.
And in reading and in science is that it's so widespread and it's so insidious. But so we have these programs that quite frankly have been proven to be really honestly blatantly anti-Semitic and also really threatening to Jews, and it's ironic. So we live in a world where schools are like fixated on their safe spaces, right, for kids who face any modicum of adversity, whether it's like a mean word or like a wrong pronoun, like how can these educators possibly justify the anti-Semitically hostile environment that they are deliberately and knowingly fostering for both their students and their staff? Where are the safe spaces for the Jews? Again, double standards. How do they reconcile this?
So I think that's an interesting question, and it's interesting because of the framing and the kind of the premise that's kind of built into the question, which is that teachers are operating from a place where they feel like there is a moral difference compared to what they should be doing versus what they are doing. And they actually believe that they are adhering to some sort of moral standard of social justice, of talking about this, fake Gaza and genocide, or fake genocide in Gaza narrative. So to their minds, they are upholding some sort of moral standard, and they're doing it via the classroom. It's fake. It's the same kind of again, faux moral justification that radicals use to justify standing in the middle of the street to block traffic or to block the freeway. They believe what they're doing is lawful and just. And again, when we have, as a society, created a space where we're not going to enforce laws, or we're going to defund the police or defund the DA or whatever it is, we are creating a permissive environment, not just in the streets, but also in the classroom. For this kind of behavior. So to their minds, they're adhering to this whatever radical standard that they're trying to advance.
Yeah. The problem is when it comes to lawful and just, does that mean that when they teach something like, I guess they don't, but what's going on in Sudan, that they think that it's lawful and just to point out the Sudanese in the class and vilify them? I mean, again, this is absolute nonsense. Right. Do they single out? Now, I hate to make the correlation between Israel and Russia, because Russia was the aggressor and Israel was the recipient, but nobody sees Ukraine as being offensive. So let's just, for the sake of the viewpoint, as you're saying, that they truly believe that Israel is the aggressor in this war that they did not want and did not start. Assuming that they believe that, they're not singling out the Russians in the class. So this is not about being just or fair. No. This is about anti-Semitism.
Correct.
Plain and simple.
Correct. And in fact, you can see that there is my dog is here. Should I grab her? Do you want to grab her?
She's eating my tree.
She's eating her bamboo.
But I
Love, come here.
Yeah, I don't really want her eating the tree per se.
Love. Come here.
Sorry for the brief introduction for dog eating my tree.
She cleared out all the dead brush. That's okay.
It sort of does look like she went at the dead stuff. So maybe I should leave her there. I'm just afraid that that's
all the fire break here that we have over here in the Palisades.
The fire break in the corner of my living room.
So sorry, what were you saying? By the way, everybody, this is Love. If you want to meet my dog, she's big pro Israel, and she keeps you all over in her heart. So.
And she eats trees.
She eats trees. Hopefully that's okay.
Yeah. We were talking about the justification for attacking Jews as an extension of Israel.
So one example I'd love to point out for people, and it doesn't apply to K through 12 specifically, but it's involving the LA City Council. So as you said, Israel was not the aggressor in that in the October 7th response. Hamas was the genocidal aggressor compared to Russia and Ukraine. Russia was the aggressor there. There are within the city of Los Angeles and within LA County, there are major Israeli and Russian communities. And in fact, in Southern California, some estimate that this is the largest Israeli community outside of Israel. Oh. So now let's look at the LA City Council. And when Putin's aggression against Ukraine started, they passed a resolution that condemned Putin's aggression, condemned the Russian Federation's aggression, but recognized the cultural contribution of the Russian community in the city of Los Angeles.
The opposite.
And said all sorts of beautiful things, the food, the music, the arts, everything. It was a beautiful love letter to the Russian community of Los Angeles. But then you look at the ceasefire resolution that was proposed. And again, even if you take the same kind of model and say, okay, you want to believe that Bibi was the aggressor, fine, whatever, but even then they don't treat Israelis the same. There was nothing in the resolution that mentioned about LA's beautiful, vibrant Israeli community and how much they contribute to the city of Los Angeles. So to me, that really underscores the division, we're not just seeing it in K through 12 teachers, but these are city council members. These are people who represent Jews, by the way, in a second largest city in America. So it's a problem that extends beyond K through 12, and it permeates. And by the way, I think that one of the major issues that we have here, and one of the things that we're proud about with ICANN, is raising visibility to the Israeli community. Israelis, in my opinion, are one of the greatest assets, not just of the Jewish community, but of the state of Israel. They're some of the best ambassadors for the state of Israel. They can share an authentic connection to Israel that I certainly cannot share myself. So I think that from that, not leveraging that identity, I shouldn't say leveraging it, but not raising awareness about the fact that there are Israeli people here. It's not just a country that's a world away. They are a people, and some of those people are here. And when you dehumanize Israelis like these teachers and like the city council members are, you begin to run into these kind of policy situations where civil rights are actually being eroded against these members of the Jewish community. So.
Yeah. And let's talk about those legislative efforts, because it provides a really important framework for the rest of our discussion. So last year, in 2024, in response to a sharp increase, honestly, in anti-Semitic incidents in schools. And again, remember, guys, we're talking about K through 12. We're not talking about the colleges that everybody knows about. We're talking about kids. There's been a tremendous spike, and this was last year. California Senate actually killed Senate Bill 1421, which was a bill that sought to create an Office of Civil Rights at the California Department of Education to investigate and address issues of unlawful discrimination, harassment, intimidation, or bullying in schools. So I'm going to ask you a hard question, and I hate when people ask me these questions. But
I'm impressed you found that bill. That's good. I don't know if that was in our notes or not.
I do deep dives on all of my shows. I spend a whole week researching every topic. And I follow them from day to day anyway. Good. So I hate this question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Can you steel man the dominant argument that an Office of Civil Rights to fight against or regulate anti-Semitism is unwarranted? What is that argument?
So, well, first of all, I think that you're asking a question that is a little bit different from what was proposed in that bill, SB 1421. And your question, it bridges to a certain extent the policy that was meant to be implemented in this new piece of legislation that was passed and signed by Newsom just a few weeks ago, or just last week, AB 715.
Yes.
So SB 1421, that was a bill that was introduced by Henry Stern last year. We supported that bill. And as you said, it would have created this new Office of Civil Rights to help better process uniform complaints that are being submitted by parents across the state. There's a massive backlog, by the way, of these uniform complaints in the state of California in the Department of Education. So we strongly supported that bill. It did not mention anti-Semitism in particular. So that is one reason for us that we supported that bill, because what is anti-Semitism? Anti-Semitism is a collection of forms of discrimination that are defined in law. So you have anti-religious bias for Jews. You have culture and ethnicity bias. You have immigration status bias as well for immigrant Jews, but you also have, importantly, national origin discrimination. So all of these discriminations, these forms of discrimination, are defined in law, but are kind of wrapped up in anti-Semitism. And the challenge is, how do we get our officials to understand when some of those activities are truly, or when an anti-Semitic activity is one of those lawfully defined forms of discrimination. One of the concerns that we actually have, I don't know if I'm answering, I don't think I'm answering your question, but we'll weave through this.
Before you get into your concerns, I really want to try this, because I can't have the opposition on my show.
Sure.
I can't wrap my head around people who have a problem with a civil rights commission. Likewise, I just want to say that it doesn't matter that the bill did not specify anti-Semitism as its centrifugal focus.
Yeah.
It was created in response.
Correct.
So people have to understand that there's a cause and effect here.
So yeah, and the reason I mention that is because what happens is anti-Semitism, this year in 2025, anti-Semitism was specifically included in the law. There were definitions around anti-Semitic learning environments and all that. Now, the problem is that, again, the steelman in opposition is the word anti-Semitism is not defined in law.
But you said it's not in the bill either.
It's not in 1421, but it was.
I'm talking about 1421 right now.
So there was no real argument against the anti-Semitic, the provisions that would have prevented anti-Semitism. It's the reason they were against the bill is because it would have, in my opinion, it would have shown a lot of the breaks, I guess, in the system of where teachers are taking advantage of students in the classroom to prey and push this ideology. Honestly, anti-Semitism wasn't really part of the discussion around that bill. So there was no argument in opposition from that standpoint.
You're talking about their motivation, which is to hide hidden agendas.
Yeah.
But on paper, in words, in the legislature,
Yep.
What did they say? I mean, they defeated the bill.
Yeah.
On what pretense was this bill defeated?
So again, this was last year, and we've had a lot of stuff in between. I believe it was because there would have been a unbearable burden placed on the California Department of Education in implementing this legislation, because there's already a backlog of complaints within the Uniform Complaint Procedure. Right. So it's simply a bureaucratic argument. It's basically the Teachers Association and the Teachers Union saying, we don't want our stuff exposed to the world, essentially. That's kind of how I took it.
Okay, that's not the steel man, by the way. It's the opposite, but it's okay. I get it. It's hard to like put yourself.
Well, it's just that if you ask me about 715, it's an easier question to answer.
I'm going to ask about 715, but 715 was not defeated. That's why I'm.
But it was heavily modified.
Yes. But. So the best answer that I just extrapolated from what you just said is they don't want an office that would enforce civil rights violations because there's already too many civil rights violations. That is the most circular and inane reasoning ever given.
Correct, and they're mainly afraid that their teachers are going to get in trouble. That's what they're afraid of. They're afraid that their teachers are going to get pulled out of the classroom, or whatever, some other issue will come up, that they will be exposed to some sort of penalty. That's what they're frankly afraid of. So anti-Semitism is that's like icing on the cake for them.
Yeah.
It really is, and that's a complaint that they can, point to and talk about Israel. So we're talking about AB 715, we're talking about that. But for 1421 in particular, the debate really was not around it. And in fact, our legislative, yes, it was introduced in response to anti-Semitic incidents, but our strategy was not to make it a Jewish bill. It was not meant to be a Jewish bill. It was meant to be, hey, this is for everybody. There's not just, hey, Armenians are being attacked, there's other LGBT stuff going on. I mean, there's all sorts of other things. So we didn't really think of 1421 as a Jewish bill in that regard.
And it wasn't. But when you say it was the icing on the cake, I could tell you from personal experience, the icing is the best part of the cake. When somebody, if somebody comes out with an uniced cake, nobody's like, oh, look at that cake. But when somebody comes out with a beautifully iced cake, it's like, oh my gosh, look at that icing.
Right.
So it may be just, again, like I don't even want to say the veneer. It is the crux of what made the bill. Correct, and the sort of circumventing of that as the primary focus of your effort doesn't mean that it wasn't actually the primary focus of the efforts. We all want to see civil rights for all people. But when there's such a disproportionately large number of violations that are occurring specifically against one group, and in this case specifically against the Jews, it really is about the Jews.
Yeah. And again, it's difficult to answer your question directly just because in the argument, in the debate about the bill, we tried to even stay away from that kind of steel manning as to why we shouldn't provide protections for anti-Semitic violations.
Yeah.
It never came up.
Well, you wouldn't steel man it. The other people would.
It never came up from their side either. Wow. Never came up from their side either because they just, even they played the game too. We're not talking about that right now. We're talking about this. So.
Okay. So let's talk about AB 715. This is very, very current. I mean, it's interesting. So this bill was unanimously approved by the California legislature, and
sort of.
Yeah, I know it was sort of. I know it was sort of. We'll get into this, but
sort of and sort of,
technically, and also very recently
there were several abstentions, by the way.
Exactly.
Some non-votes.
Exactly. Yeah. But there were no oppositions.
There were no votes.
So, it was very recently, like in the last couple of weeks, ratified by. I have no sense of time anymore. Don't even ask me what happened yesterday.
Newsom signed the bill into law on October 7th.
October 7th. So that was on October 7th.
On October 7th.
Okay, interesting.
Symbolically done.
Do you think he did that on purpose?
Yeah, because there's nothing in the bill really to celebrate, so he might as well put it on a day
when
we can make it look bigger than it actually is, in my opinion.
Okay. So a week ago, basically.
Sorry, Governor. But yeah.
Don't apologize to our governor. So anyway, 715 claims to pick up pretty much where 1421 left off, establishing a new office of civil rights and an antisemitism. Wow, I only say this word 100 times a day, and all of a sudden I can't. An anti-Semitism prevention coordinator to develop training resources and enforcement strategies for K through 12 schools. I mean, this sounds really good, but it's not that cut and dry. Like every deal involving Jews these days, AB 715 is just a package of compromises. Why do we need to stay vigilant and continue to advocate for Jewish protections even in light of this adoption?
It's a great question. I think it's the thing that California Jews and that anybody who cares about the Jewish community in California or cares about Israel in California should be thinking about, because, and I will say that, like, I haven't seen a lot of celebration around the passage of this bill, a little bit here and there. I think some of the legislators are making tours of the state and giving town halls and things, maybe spiking the ball a little bit. But what was the question exactly? Sorry, again, what exactly are we talking?
I was just wondering, why do we have to stay? So now we have it. It's law. Why do we have to stay vigilant?
We have to stay vigilant because, as you said, the bill that passed final passage and was signed into law was way different from what actually went through the legislative process. I will say that.
Okay.
So there was so when AB 715 was first introduced. And by the way, we should say that there was a bill that was before that. I'm sorry for all the numbers and letters and things, but there was AB 1468, which was an ethnic study, what I call the ethnic studies expansion bill. It would have massively expanded ethnic studies. We opposed that bill. That was the Jewish Caucus's signature effort. This is important because when 715 finally got introduced, because 1468 was shelved, there was very little time to design and write the bill. Apparently, there had been no policy discussions between 1421 and there was another bill. I can't remember the name. I think it was like 2918. I think is what the bill number was last year. Also, that dealt with this kind of stuff, but no real policy homework had been done by the staff and legislators in that intervening time. And so they came up with this. Let's just throw this thing out, and it was AB 715, and that is what unanimously passed out of the assembly. Not one no vote. And the issue with that is that it wasn't a fully baked bill. And so members were being asked to vote on that bill out of the assembly because when it went over to the Senate, there were going to be some changes made.
Okay.
So when people say that there were no votes, no opposition, there was a lot of leeway given to the bill authors and to the sponsors that, hey, trust us, bro. It's going to be okay once it gets to the end of the end of the line. This legislative session this year in California was a little crazy because, again, we had the fires. We had a special session in January around the fires. A lot of things were late. And so by the time we got to the constitutional deadlines, these are state constitutional issues that we can't fudge, they were unable to come to an agreement on major provisions around this legislation, around things like factually accurate instruction, excuse me, around other provisions around complaints and things like that. And so one of the main reasons we need to stay vigilant is because in those floor debates, when they were talking about the bill and why the bill should be voted on positively, they said, we are going to pass cleanup legislation as soon as possible so that teachers are not exposed. Remember, I mentioned to you that it's the exposure of the teachers that really freaks them out. Now, how does this work technically? I'm sorry, we're going to get into some technical stuff here. A legislative session generally runs from early January until end of September, sometimes end of August, depending on if it's an odd-numbered year or an even-numbered year. When Governor Newsom signs a bill that has made it all the way through the legislative process and it has landed on his desk, that bill does not come into effect by law now. So, for example, he signed that bill on October 7th. The bill is not law technically until January 1st, 2026.
Okay.
Their plan and their concern is that when school starts back after winter break, teachers are going to be exposed under this new law, especially the factually accurate instruction provision. So they have said they're working on fix-it legislation. Okay. Now, when you talk about fix-it legislation, under urgency, by the way, what's a bill under urgency? That means that immediately when the governor signs it, it comes into law. So there are urgency provisions that are written into the bill that are different from a non-urgency bill. The reason we need to stay vigilant is because the story is not over. Yes, the bill was passed out of the legislature unanimously. Yes, he signed it into law. But even in his signing statement, in Newsom's signing statement, he said, I commend the authors of this bill in their commitment to addressing some of the concerns around unintended consequences of this bill in the next session. So they're already talking about watering it down, in my opinion, even further than what it already is. So that's the main reason to stay vigilant over what was just passed. That book is not closed. It's closed temporarily, but it's going to be reopened very quickly in the beginning of the year. And again, they could pass something in a matter of days, quickly run it through this process and get it on the government. They could totally gut a lot of the provisions that were passed here, and nobody's paying attention because we're celebrating now the bill was passed. We're so happy we have these protections, and nobody's paying attention to that intervening period when things can be majorly changed in the law.
What kinds of powers will this anti-Semitism prevention coordinator have?
None. So the coordinators have no power. Sorry. the coordinators have no power. They have the duty to provide technical expertise, and that's it. They have no power to investigate. They have no power to enforce. They simply provide guides and legal compliance suggestions. And by the way, what's very important to know is that these coordinators do not sit in the Department of Education, which is where all the problems are happening.
Okay.
These coordinators are sitting in a new Office of Civil Rights that's not housed in the agency, which is called the Department of Education. It's housed in what's called government operations, which is directly in control of the governor.
Okay.
So he will have major authority over them. He will select who they are, by the way. These roles are appointed by the governor and confirmed by the Senate. A little trick, by the way, that they did in AB 715, which I think's a little shady, and I don't approve of the way that they did it, and it came up during committee, was there's a line at the very end of the bill that says this bill shall be active only if the provisions of SB 48 are also signed into law and in effect when this law comes into effect. What is SB 48?
Yeah,
SB 40,
next question.
SB 48 is all the other coordinators for LGBT, for religion, for racial discrimination, for whatever else. And there may be more that they add on. Essentially, they are fancy, what are called Title VI coordinators that exist primarily within universities and some public school settings as well to provide Title VI legal guidance for compliance. But they've just given them here, in this case, antisemitism, LGBT, whatever. So the whole enterprise around AB 715 is incomplete without also understanding SB 48. And when you look at it as a policy altogether, it's essentially just a kind of a diversity, equity, and inclusion Title VI kind of coordination regime. The other thing, by the way, here's the other reason, the second reason to be very vigilant moving forward is that now that this bill is passed, and even regardless of whatever amendments or whatever provisions may be put in, legislators now say, hey, Jews were concerned about anti-Semitism and ethnic studies. Guess what? They passed AB 715. Now we can move forward and put forth all of our other ethnic studies policies in place that we want to put in. And you have nothing to complain about because the anti-Semitism bill has been passed. To me, that's the greatest threat, is the false sense of security around the passage of this bill.
So is anyone currently enforcing civil rights and anti-Semitic infringements perpetrated by ethnic studies instructors?
Amazingly, when this bill came up, and even when 1421 came up last year, it's almost like, again, to my opinion, politics is the best driver of policy, not legislative process, not doing it all the right way with this. So what's up with that? Who is the current state superintendent of public instruction for the state of California? This is a constitutional officer. This is a direct election. The people of California put this person in office. His name is Tony Thurmond, former legislator in the California legislature. He actually was a member of the California Legislative Jewish Caucus. He's African American, but he was raised by Jews, and so he has an affinity for the community. He's running for governor. So once he announced his run for governor, all of a sudden, some of the backlog of complaints, especially the anti-Semitic ones, were getting resolved. And they were finding that the districts were in violation. So Campbell, Santa Ana, there's some others across the state that have been found in violation by the Department of Education. So it is supposed to be Tony Thurmond, a gubernatorial candidate for the state of California, who is supposed to be adjudicating some of these complaints, and he is moving slowly to get it done. So,
okay, I don't know if you can answer this. Now that Katie Porter has sort of thrown mashed potatoes on her own
that's
campaign,
a phenomenal way of putting it. Yes.
yes. Would you endorse Thurmond for governor?
No.
Okay.
if it's a choice, if it's a choice between Porter and Thurmond, I guess we have to go with Thurmond. But there's a whole slate of candidates that are running. Thurmond is not a bad guy. But
will he be good for the Jews? Will he be good for ethnic studies? Will he be good for civil rights?
It's unclear.
Okay.
Because you know what? He had 8 years to do it as superintendent of public instruction. The fact that he spends his last 2 years finally doing the job, it does not fill me with confidence that he would do it as governor.
Interesting. Okay. Except for that, if he believes that taking that action now would help him to win the gubernatorial race, it seems like that perhaps being in the governor's office instead of the school board office, or whatever you call it, not the school board office, but is it the school board office?
Department of Education.
Department of Education. Yeah, whatever. School board office. Yeah.
We can do a civics 101 one day too. That's okay. That's right.
That maybe his priorities would be different. It's interesting to think, to me, that he believes that Californians do care about these issues, because if you look at what's going on in our streets, it seems like the opposite.
And so that you're touching on a larger discussion of what it means to be a California politician,
Yeah.
which in a place where we have like a Democratic supermajority, super control, where the reality is that they look at elected office like winning the lottery. Honestly, they're not competent for the positions. They don't have a history. They'll infiltrate local government and some of these local offices and create a name for themselves with very thin qualifications, and then just get into these seats. And you look at Ricardo Lara, who's the insurance commissioner, who spent tens of thousands of dollars on vacations and conferences and things that have nothing to do with his constitutional obligations. So honestly, California politicians care about winning the election. As soon as they get in and get the perks, nothing matters until it's election season again. So.
Okay, let's talk about a special election. I was going to save this for the end, but it's relevant to this moment in our conversation. So obviously here in California, we're currently entering into a special election on Proposition 50. Vote no. This is a gerrymander created to further silence the 40% of Californians who voted Republican in this last election, voted Trump, and are honestly completely lost in the annals of the Electoral College. The state is now looking to pare down Republican representation to 4 seats out of 54. This is far lower than anything that would actually resemble proportionality in any universe. If Prop 50 passes, do you see any additional or dangerous ramifications for the future of ethnic studies?
That's an interesting question. So first of all, we have to look at the broader implications of the passage of Prop 50. What Prop 50 will do is, as you said, not just create new Democratic seats out of what are currently Republican seats. And again, we're a bipartisan organization. I personally don't even see these as partisan issues. I see them as fundamental to being an American citizen and a resident of the state of California. They're not really partisan. But what Prop 50 will do is pave the way for more radical extremists to come into office, especially in Congress. Now, we have some pretty bad members of Congress now from the state of California who are currently in office. And thankfully, because they're in the minority, they're not able to do much of anything. If they are in the majority, and if this gerrymandering helps put Democrats in the majority, I would be concerned about the role, for example, that different federal agencies in terms of the Department of Education at the federal level, or even in a Democratic administration under the U.S. Department of Justice, whether they would continue looking at these in the way that they should according to law. So I think that there are negative implications broadly as it relates to Prop 50 and the kinds of members of Congress that will likely get in under this scenario and the kinds of radical positions. I just think it would only help ethnic studies become more entrenched. Exactly. And by the way, it is part of this lie of we want our stories told. That's called history. If you want, and you know what? There was a bill called SB 510. One of the benefits of having a crazy memory is bill numbers. SB 510 was co-authored by California State Senator Laura Richardson, who formerly was a House member of Congress down in the South Bay here. And she put a bill in that expanded the study of African American history. If you want your stories told, do a bill like that. That is not what ethnic studies is.
Yes.
So we supported Laura Richardson in that bill. I have to see if that bill passed. But we supported that bill precisely because it showed the lie of ethnic studies and how it's not about your stories, it's about this radical ideology.
Yeah. So let me ask you, because what happens if like an individual teacher has an issue with the school approved ethnic studies curriculum? First of all, can they modify this coursework? I'm not speaking legally now, or I don't know, maybe it is legal, I don't know. And have we seen that kind of pushback? I mean, I personally, perhaps naively, I want to believe that not all teachers are in alignment with this indoctrination and, again, this very overt anti-Semitism.
So the question is, what's the question exactly? Can they? What liberty do they have?
So let's say that my school down the street approves a certain ethnic studies curriculum, and it's very, very anti-Semitic in nature, anti-Zionist, anti-Israel, and any or all of the things. Does a teacher have recourse to say, I don't agree with this segment of the curriculum, I refuse to teach it, or I'm going to teach a different concept instead? And if so, do you know if we've seen this kind of pushback from educators?
Okay, so the answer is yes. Yes, teachers do have recourse. The scenario that you're painting is not one that we see very often, unfortunately. We'd like to see it more, but we have seen it. Okay. That said, I would like to say that the scenario that we do see more often is the inverse of what you're saying. It is that the teacher feels that the curriculum doesn't go far enough in advancing anti-Semitic blood libels or anti-Israel talking points. And in that case, just like a teacher who has some flexibility in terms of what they're able to introduce in the classroom, and as long as they adhere to the standards, or to some standards, then they're okay. So they do have that flexibility, but unfortunately we see more often than not teachers exploiting that to push the agenda that they want to push, which is, again, it's this kind of DSA, Democratic Socialist style agenda. Essentially, I would almost say that I bet you that in terms of profession, public school teachers are the largest share of DSA members probably in America. So.
I want to touch upon the DSA statement that came out about the ceasefire because it's truly mind-boggling. But before we do,
I loved their statement. I thought it was great. I'll tell you why. It was terrible from a pro-Israel standpoint, but I'll tell you why I loved it.
Okay, we'll mention that a little bit later. It's scary to think that our educators are democratic socialists because we live in a capitalist free market economy. There's that. But from what I understand, parents can't opt their kids out. I mean, Jewish students literally have to listen to lectures that crucify them, their family heritage, their faith, their beliefs, and their entire community. According to the Deborah Project, a California court recently cleared the way for students and their parents to sue school districts across the state over the adoption of ethnic studies curricula containing anti-Semitic components. Is this the recourse we need to fill the AB 17 gap, or is it insufficient?
Another good policy question. So what you're describing is a situation where because the law is insufficient in covering these scenarios, and because the state of California in its leadership with the legislature and the governor and Tony Thurmond, superintendent of public instruction, the courts are becoming a recourse. And to my mind, that means that the legislature has failed and that the executive branch has failed, because when we complain, we go to the executive branch, we go to the Department of Education, and they don't adjudicate the complaint, or they don't do it quick enough. And so your only recourse is to go to the courts. So to me, that's a failure. So I don't see that as the main recourse. I see it as a hopefully a snapshot in time test that hopefully some federal authorities will be able to step in and look at this closer, like Harmeet Dillon, who is the Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights, and she's looking at this very closely. Leo Terrell is part of that team as well. So I would imagine that they're both awesome. I would hope that they would, I imagine a scenario where they're going to have to come in. And again, if California's leaders are not able to step up and address this and do what they're legally obligated to do, and there becomes such a gulf between, or a gap between what the law requires in terms of civil rights and what the state of California is actually implementing, then we have a problem that the feds need to step in because the state's not stepping in. The state, by the way, could step in if there is an issue in Santa Ana, for example, where they try to do this ethnic studies implementation on Jewish holidays so that Jews couldn't participate. The state should have stepped in, but they're too busy trying to fight Trump and do other kind of nonsense. So I don't think the courts are a recourse. The recourse has to be that we have got to get this through the legislature and get, by the way, superintendent of public instruction is a big race next year. There are candidates who are running. We need to hold them to account and tell them what we expect of them when they get into office and get someone who isn't there for the perk and the vacation benefits. Get someone who actually do the job well.
Yeah. Let me just take a moment to give a huge shout out to Leo Terrell. What a force of nature. You want to talk about our non-Jewish allies. To think that our anti-Semitisms are probably for the first time ever is not Jewish, and just how passionate he is. I love the guy. Yeah. And he's retweeted me 4 times.
Well, congrats. That's very cool.
Anyway, shout out to Leo.
He's the best.
He is. He's pretty extraordinary. And with his Hadar golden hat, I just like his level of commitment has really been excelsior. I hope everybody follows him on X. Yeah. Let's talk about the unions again, and let's bring it home. Okay. Let's bring it to Los Angeles. When I think about this whole issue, I just keep coming back to that person who secretly filmed. Maybe it wasn't even secret. The labor union that had a meeting on how to undermine and systematically bypass any ethnic studies limitations in order to ensure that anti-Israel, however you pronounce that word. I write it all the time. I have no idea how to pronounce it. Hitherto. It's probably height.
I don't know what you're saying.
It's a weird like SAT word that I've written my whole life, but I don't even know how to pronounce. But that word, they happen to be anti-Semitic. The content that's taught to our students, and they are having actual meetings on how to subvert the system and ensure that they can teach this content. So, Dillon, why are educators so obsessed with Israel and the Jewish people that they will bypass laws in order to smear them? And what's more, sorry, are you okay with me by piling on a second question on this one? Sure. Because it's relevant, but what does Israel have to do with U.S. ethnic studies? And in assuming the current ceasefire holds, are there plans to remove the Gaza war from this curriculum? Because if not, it's very transparent what their agenda is.
Yeah. All right. So first of all, the whole obsession by the teachers' unions, the teachers themselves, and other advocates associated with the teachers, it's kind of from my observation, it's ancillary to their primary objective of acquiring political power and influence in the pursuit of advancing far-left progressive, like ultra-progressive causes. Anti-Israel happens to be part of that. Anti-America happens to be part of that. There's a whole set of things that happen to be part of. It's like a menu of options that they've adopted wholesale. This is who we are. This is what we're going to adopt. This is part of that policy package. So that's not to diminish the impact that activism and that fringe kind of promotion of policy has on real families. But I wouldn't take it to narrowly say they're just obsessed with Israel. They're obsessed with this collection of policies that happens to include Israel, but that I would say is largely anti-American, anti-West. Go ahead, yeah.
What other foreign countries are included in the ethnic studies curriculum?
So, interestingly, the only other country, it's not a foreign country, that is compared or treated like Israel is America.
Okay, so Dillon,
so again,
but this is not just anti-American. If the only foreign country, ethnic studies is an American issue. Otherwise, because America is the most multicultural nation on earth, right? So either it's everyone or it's no one. So everyone is America. For them to single out one country, Israel, as somehow being relevant, and you're saying inextricably relevant to their cause,
Yep.
This is purely anti-Semitic.
Correct. I agree.
Purely.
Agree. I'm just saying that, like, from a policy standpoint, the other country that they hate is America. No other country really gets the same treatment because, look at what's happening in the UK. They would probably love us to be more like the UK or like countries in Europe. So Israel and America, as far as I have seen, I may be wrong. I'm sure there's other countries that maybe, I don't know what standard they're holding them to. But as far as I've seen, the two countries they hate the most are the United States and Israel together.
And by the way, when Israel is held to a platinum standard where no one else is even being held to bronze.
Not even the United States, by the way.
Not even the United States. Right. What it's saying is not that they hate Israel, but that they that whether they like it or not, they're holding them in the highest esteem, because the only way you could hold someone to the highest standard is to assume that there's a standard to be reached.
I think that's a nice thought. I think they just do it because they hate Israel and they want to create an impossible standard that anyone could achieve. And they criticize it on that basis.
Okay, I'm sticking with my theory on this one.
Yours works too, but I'm more cynical.
Okay. Let's get into this DSA statement, the Democratic Socialists of America. I read it. It's funny because the website itself is the DSA website, but it says at the bottom that it's the young Democratic Socialists of America. So I'm unclear who actually put out this formal statement. It was a repulsive repudiation of all things Israel in light of a ceasefire that Israel agreed to. And we also see this with the silence of the ceasefire now crowd, now that we have a ceasefire. It sounds to me, and I didn't realize this, that it is the NEA, is the Los Angeles Teachers Union, is the state board of education, whatever it's called, you know the thing.
Yep.
Are they on board with this statement, or is this like maybe theoretically they agree with it, but they would never say it out loud? And feel free to say why you love this most repulsive thing that I've read, piece of propaganda and lies in a really long time.
So first and foremost, the reason I very much appreciate the statement that they put out is because it was very clear in where they stand. There was no confusion as to what their position is on the issue of Israel as an ally of the United States, on the issue of the U.S.-Israel alliance, and most importantly, what policies they're going to fight for in order to advance their agenda. So to me, I read it as a policy statement of, hey, here's what is important to you. Here's what we need to be on the lookout for as we're looking at state and local governments where many DSA are. By the way, there's not many DSA members in Congress. You've got, I think, Bernie Sanders, you've got AOC and others. But there's a massive, what people aren't paying attention to is that there's a massive pipeline of DSA electeds who will be on their way to Congress. Right. So last I counted, there were, I think, 122 state and local DSA who are openly DSA.
In California?
Across the country.
Across the country.
So that was like a couple years ago. So that it may have grown by now. I have to do another count. But this is the major issue. What was the other part of the question I didn't answer?
That's okay. Here's your notepad.
Yes.
No,
but I think so I love the statement for that reason. Yeah. In terms of the NEA, the UTLA, and all that, many of them are DSA members. So yes, I think that in the leadership of these unions, these are policy-making bodies. There are policy-making bodies within the unions. Many of them are DSA activists. It's almost like DSA has become the most democratic you could be, the most anti-Trump you could be, and so many people are pushed to that fringe because of that.
Yeah. Okay. It always worries me when people say it's just a few people, and you name two of the most notable people in Congress.
They did a town hall last night. I recommend people to watch. AOC said that she's concerned about Deloitte polluting our rivers. Deloitte is a accounting firm. Right. Yes. She may have meant DuPont, which also doesn't do that anymore.
Well, she's a bona fide idiot, but
100%.
that seems to be besides the point.
Yeah.
I remember that when she and her besties, Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib, were all elected to the House, that AIPAC kept saying, it's only 3 people, it's only 3 people. And I'm like, no, it's 3 people. And sure enough, they've grown in ranks steadily. And now the lunatic fringe is now vying to be the mouthpieces of the entire Democratic Party. So I don't care if it's 1 or 2 people. These are some of the most recognizable names, one in the Senate, one in the House. And now they're actually, floating AOC as first as a senator to unseat Schumer, and then they're thinking in the not long term for president. And it's frightening that we've come to a reality where this is even a feasibility, or that anybody is taking this concept seriously.
Right.
I want to talk about something that I haven't heard people talk about, but bothers me to the core. And that is that another one of the sort of like manipulative tactics that these teachers are using is that this part people are talking about, that they're conflating Israel with Jews. Okay, that everyone's talking about. I mean, everyone who's in the know on this. In the primary intention, of course, is to discredit both. But there's a secondary intention, which is to drive a wedge between Jews and Israel, which encourages the disaffection of Jewish kids who see safety. It literally, maybe even survival, if they grew up with like the Holocaust narrative, etc., in just disowning their heritage. So in your opinion, I know what my opinion is, but in your opinion, do you think that this ethnic studies indoctrination threatens the future of American Jewry? Because I'm seeing more and more kids running, like they're not walking, they are running away from their Judaism.
Boy, you have touched on, I think this is probably the most important question we can talk about for this podcast, actually. And unfortunately, it is not just, so the answer is yes to what you asked. That is absolutely the intention. It is to drive a wedge, not just between students in Israel, but this sick, and I think it's incredibly predatory, desire to separate young Jewish students from Israel, in a way that one Fox News anchor referred to it as a form of grooming. And I agree with that. It is a form of grooming from the standpoint of the teachers. So that is happening, and it's a major problem. And that's why I believe that we need to do all we can. As you said, right now, you can't opt your student out of ethnic studies in K. That's not an option. It may be, depending on a certain interpretation of a recent Supreme Court case with the LGBT stuff. And there's a lot of LGBT stuff in the ethnic studies curriculum. But right now, there is no opt-out approach. But there's an even bigger problem to this that I think few people are aware of. And that is that the organized, I'm sorry to say this may be controversial for people listening, but the organized Jewish community, mostly driven and largely driven exclusively by the legacy organizations like the Jewish Federations, like ADL, like not so much AJC, but especially ADL and the federations, JCRCs and things like that. What I have observed is these organizations pushing policies that relate to Jewish life in the United States, especially in California in this case, but exclusive of the state of Israel. What do I mean by that in practice? So when ethnic studies, the first draft curriculum came out in June of 2019, there was a group of us. ICANN was brand new. I don't think people ever even knew what we were doing or who we were. But there was a collection of groups that came together, like the Federations, JCRCs, ADLs, the groups I said. What did they say when they saw the pro-BDS, virulently anti-Israel content? they said the following: maybe it's okay to leave that content in, but let's negotiate and ensure that they add anti-Semitism as a form of discrimination that American Jews have had to suffer from. So at least if Arab students are getting their anti-Israel stuff from their on their side, or whatever portion it was, at least as Jews, we will get to tell our story of facing anti-Semitism in America. That to me is unacceptable. Why? Because imagine the student named Avi, or the student named Yaki, or who, like, he has an Israeli nickname or name or whatever. They don't have a choice. By the way, California is home to the largest Israeli population outside of Israel.
Yeah.
Imagine if you're an Israeli student in California public school, why should you be subject to that form of discrimination or exposure or narrative from your home country, which is your heritage? And we don't expect any other student from any other background to have that kind of exposure or treatment. Could you imagine, by the way, if we did the same about, let's have the Donald Trump version of ethnic studies taught about Mexico. Do we think the California legislature would like that? And I'm not even saying what Donald Trump said was necessarily bad. We was talking about the cartels and things, but Democrats twist his words into applying to all Mexican Americans. So I say when legislators and other policymakers talk about Israel, like they say Donald Trump talks about Mexico and other Latin American countries, they're doing the same thing that they're accusing him of doing. And the issue is that it's not just the teachers. Unfortunately, it's our Jewish organizations as well who want to find a way out to having to deal with Israel, because they're not policy people in that regard. So
yes, the double. No, don't be sorry. This is the double standards. They never end. We literally just like, let's just get the double standard stamp and just stamp it on everything that we say. But I think I wasn't clear on my question. Trying to drive a wedge between Israel and Jews is a wedge issue. We know about that. That's very front and center. What I'm saying that I think is even darker is that they are trying to wedge Jewish children away from Judaism, having not completely separate from Israel, because these kids,
from Judaism,
when you show up to school on the first day of school in Los Angeles and there's swastikas all over the welcome banner, then your first thought as a 7-year-old is, God, it sucks to be Jewish. Then you get into your woke baby class or what, I mean, obviously that wouldn't be a 7-year-old. And they tell you, yes, Jews are bad. And you're like, and the world hates me for being Jewish. It would be so much easier not to be Jewish. Then these kids go to Columbia and Harvard and in UCLA and decide that, being Jewish is nothing but a curse. And now we have a whole generation who don't want Jewish children because they don't want not because they didn't love their bar mitzvah or their bubby, but because they don't want their child to grow up in a world that is increasingly threatening to their lives. And so we wind up in a world where we only have maybe 15 million, maybe 16 million Jews, depending on your definition of a Jew. Now we have millions who are like, yeah, not me. I'm the Jewish voice for peace. I am not that Jew. I am I'm a disaffected, spiritual but not religious, Jewish only in name. I show up in shul because my parents make me. I will never show up again once I'm an adult, and I will not have Jewish children Jews. Yeah. That's a real threat. And we would never ask that of any
other religion.
Double stamp.
Yeah. I mean, so I guess, not only are they separating from Israel, I would imagine that they're separating and also trying to create a wedge between Jewish students and their Judaism. I'm not a religious person at all, my exposure to the Jewish community is primarily through secular organizations and activities and things. But definitely, I think we see that kind of activity in the classroom where they're trying to drive a wedge. Again, as somebody who's worked for the state of Israel and who cares about Israel as a policy issue, definitely seeing a wedge between anybody's connection to Israel and in the classroom. But again, one of my concerns is that the Jewish community is helping to feed into that by sidelining Israel. So
There's a lot of talk about Qatari influence.
Yep.
Of course, this is
Yep.
all the way. I mean, this week it's a very big thing, even beyond education. But when we think about Qatari influence in American education, everybody immediately thinks about our colleges, right? And in these multi-billion-dollar endowments that we're hearing about. To the worst actors in the anti-Semitic field. However, Qatar has also infiltrated our K through 12 system.
Absolutely.
And I was wondering, so they have this choices program.
Yep.
What could you tell us about it? How many schools across the country have adopted it?
So I actually don't know much about the Choices program. I know it exists. I know that there are many Qatari funded organizations that, again, operate at the state level. They're operating directly with departments of education. I know that we work also in Massachusetts. I know that there's a Qatari entity. I don't think it's Choices. It's called something else, I think. But they have contracted with the Massachusetts Department of Education for early education and secondary education to provide material and content. So that is something that we're trying to get our arms around still. I don't have an answer for you on specifically what that looks like, but we know that again, insofar as we're concerned about Qatari influence within universities, we should be way more concerned about the influence within the public school system across the U.S.
Yeah. So we've already discussed this. There's just no plausible deniability at this point. What we're facing is a full and unapologetic assault on the Jewish people, trying and failing to masquerade itself as righteous indignation against Israel's war in Gaza. So why has the NEA rejected the IRA, what we call IRA, definition of anti-Semitism, renounced cooperation with the Anti-Defamation League, literally, not figuratively, literally wiped Israel off of their maps, and even removed the Jewish people from Holocaust history? Sorry for asking. You're not the person who has to answer these, but
so I mean, why have they done it? Because again,
but how? But not just why have they done it? How can they pretend that this is about the war in Gaza, which is what they keep saying?
The war is an excuse. I mean, look, again, all of this, it's wrapped up in advancing a package of policies that happen to also include, again, I don't want to diminish the impact, but I also don't want to give the impression that these people are huddling around. Some of them are, right? There's a handful of people that do huddle around and say, hey, how can we screw Israel today? That is not the entirety
right.
of NEA or even UTLA or whatever. It just happens to be a part and parcel of this collection of other policies that they are obsessed with getting passed, and it's largely aligned with far left democratic or progressive policies. So to me, I think that's why they're doing it. Again, a few of them enjoy the treatment of Israel, but I think it's largely and that's why I think when you're looking at teachers unions, they're what are called, I believe labor unions are 501c5 organizations in the tax code. So, my issue with that is that that tax code is designed to have teacher unions act for the purpose of collective bargaining for the benefit of their members, not to act as partisan political entities that may harm their members. So I think that we need to take a closer look at the tax code, how that stuff looks like, because they're just abusing the system. These are activists who are abusing the vehicle that they have power in.
Exactly. Exactly. This isn't about paying benefits.
No, it's not about paying benefits.
Okay, Dillon. Now this is one that you should be able to answer very, very easily because you are the guy.
Let's see.
Why should Americans who honestly don't care about Jews or even hate them? When I say don't care, I mean like it's not on their radar, whatever. Like, why should these people care about institutionalized anti-Semitism?
Because it doesn't end with Jews. I mean, the reason I am so obsessed with this, and Jews in particular, and the issue of anti-Semitism and the double standard, is because there is a double standard. If there's a double standard for one person, for one people, there's a double standard for any people. So, we talk about America becoming a more perfect union, and we're never the perfect union, but we're always striving for perfection. We will never get there if we treat Jews or any minority or any type of person differently from anybody else. And to me, again, as I said in the beginning, it tears at the fabric of this country, of the United States. It tears at the fabric of what makes both the United States and Israel exceptional countries on earth. And again, I think that when you look at the minority of Jews in the world, it's like 0.1% or something of people. There was a 0.01 or something like that.
It's 0.02%. So
0.02, yeah.
1/10 of 1%.
Exactly. So it's tiny, tiny.
I'm sorry.
So if you're, I think that's right. So if you're,
tenths.
Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah. So no. So how is it possible that if we care about minority rights, how is it possible that on Earth this is the only minority that gets treated as if it's the majority running and controlling everything? It's insane. To me, it's the ultimate intelligence test. By the way, right? If you're wrong at Israel, you're just dumb, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And the same goes for how you treat Jews. So to me, that's fundamentally what the issue is. It's we're not equal. We're not all equal if we treat Jews differently or any other minority community. So.
For me, the bigger issue is just that a society that is so consumed by hate, and particularly a society that's consumed by hate and doesn't recognize that it's consumed by hate, that really creates an environment that ultimately will become so self-destructive, because democracies are not built on hate. They're built on tolerance.
Absolutely.
And I even hate the word tolerance, because tolerance, like to tolerate somebody, is like, oh, okay,
it's like the
whatever.
least amount of respect you could give somebody. Yes, correct.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah. It's building a society of mutual respect.
Yeah,
is what we should be striving for. Not just tolerance, but mutual respect.
Yeah, but the truth is that these what we're talking about today, these anti-Semitic elements, quite frankly, are anti-American, not just because they tug at the fabric of our society, but because they're actually anti-American.
That too, right? Yeah.
Can you explain?
Yeah, I mean, this is kind of, I kind of hate to say it this way, but it's almost like the McCarthy era communists, that these people are becoming mainstream, and they just want to tear at the democratic institutions of the United States. And as in this case, the teachers are using it through their teachers unions. Certain political parties are using it through the party apparatus and elections and things. But there is, and I think we're seeing it more after the election of Donald Trump. However you felt about Trump, and now he's in his second term, he's trying to kind of restore and rebuild America and get us to become more prosperous. Even if you think America's a prosperous state, we can always be more prosperous. And yet some people are opposed to that. And I think it's a strange kind of virus that people have that embrace this kind of anti-American ideology. I can't explain it. I don't understand it.
Yeah, the greatest country on earth. I mean, we can see it. For anybody who doesn't believe it, just go online. They don't just build. They don't just burn Israeli flags. They burn American flags with it, and that is telling. But read the doctrine as well. They literally talk about getting rid of capitalism, breaking down the nuclear family, and in other things that are so fundamental to a successful democracy. And the ethnic studies curriculum available at cde.ca.gov, that's the California Department of Education website, it literally reads like a handbook for anti-American. Seriously, it reads like a handbook for anti-American activism. I'm shocked. And the thing that bothers me most, by the way, about that is, as a lobbyist, I trusted my colleagues when there were many in the community who said, "Oh, we're going to fix ethnic studies. This looks great, and we're going to write the curriculum version of for the Jewish community, that kind of thing." And okay, cool. K through 12. I'm a foreign policy guy. I trust you on ethics. So I went back and read it a few months ago. It's terrible. It is. It might as well be stamped by Saul Alinsky, Rules for Radicals. I mean, I'm sure they recommend reading that for K through 12. It's terrible. Yeah. So it's astounding. It's as we would say, it's a shanda. It is a shanda. It is a shanda. A balagan.
Balagan, yeah.
Okay, you know all the words. Okay, I'll just.
I only worked for the Israeli government for 10 years. I picked up a
you
little
probably
bit of
know
Hebrew.
more words than I do. Okay, so let's go back to something we touched upon in the beginning. Thank you for being so generous with your time.
Absolutely.
I'm really enjoying this
maybe you'll get me out of
conversation.
an event. I can skip tonight.
Get you out of you'll be able to go online and say, no, look, there it is, right there.
Let's take as long as you need.
You could tell the difference in our attire. Who's going to an event
That's
tonight?
Okay. Yeah.
Anyway, there are far broader implications of the ethnic studies, and we haven't even really talked too much about DEI, but they're inextricably linked. Yep. This is a mandate that should be of major concern to all Americans. So among these concerns for me, and I know for you because you've already addressed it, is the conflation of success and exceptionalism with detestable oppression. And therefore, these success in exceptionalism being ideals to be reviled and repudiated. We see this equity. For those of you who don't understand what equity is, we see this equity framework being touted most prominently by Zoran Mamdani, who is currently he's running on a platform that includes abolishing gifted and talented accelerated studies in New York City. What is the real goal of this dumbing down of our nation?
So I don't know for sure, right? This isn't something that I typically study or talk about.
Okay.
But if I were to give my opinion as somebody who cares, a dumb society is easy to control.
Exactly.
All right. I mean, the thing, if you watch the recent interviews, and I think there's a debate right now, probably with we're gonna have to see this with Mamdani and Cuomo. The things he says in the recent interview, he just gave an interview on Fox within the past 24 hours. This guy is he should have an IMDb profile, not a New York Assemblyman official bio, because he's an actor. Yeah. And by the way, many of these people are actors. They are exceptional at delivering lines. And by the way, a lot of the people who are in office now, don't forget, came into office during 2020 and 2022. What happened in 2020 and 2022?
The pandemic.
And so the pandemic prevented people from being able to get up close and personal with these candidates to hear exactly what they were saying, what they're about, and more than that, to see if they're credible, if they actually can do what they say and not just deliver lines on a screen with the camera. Now Mamdani has taken this to another level. But I really do think it's about the destruction of of the United States. And by the way, if we destroy the United States, and if we destroy the United States in its current form, Israel cannot survive.
I'm going to debate. I could debate that with you. As far as I see, let me tell you what I see. I see that Israel is going to be the last standing democracy on earth because they will not allow themselves to be overtaken by Islamic radicalism, which has already taken over, obviously, the Middle East. Now it's on the verge of taking over Europe. And after Donald Trump, I have zero confidence that it's not going to infiltrate us as well. It's taken over Canada. It will get into South America. It's taken over Australia, but I think that to an extent, Israel is impervious to this as long as there are. Now we're going to get back to that concept of Judea, Samaria, whatever, Palestinian territories that separate radical Islam from the Jewish state. I really do believe that they might be the last man standing. They're also extricating themselves militarily from America, understanding that when the Democrats get back in power, they're going to be in trouble. They've got 3 years to become militarily independent.
1 year.
Well, okay,
maybe.
Congress.
Let's see what happens. Let's see what happens to the midterms. But we can't count on that. It's scary. We are everything nowadays from Prop 50 to the midterms. Every election, every vote matters from now on. I mean, it's so critical. Vote no on Prop 50. ICANN has taken an official position to vote no on Prop 50.
Vote no on 50.
Yeah.
I already did.
Yeah, I did too.
And vote no on Mom Donnie.
Love did not. Love is
If
not
you're
from
in
Orange
New York.
County. Love is not from Orange County. She did not register to vote like that Orange County dog. But she encourages everybody to vote no too.
Well, come on. How do you go against a face like that?
Exactly.
Okay, so I know just one last question I think about the actual education system, and that's that even as our kids on average right now across the country are performing basic skills such as math and reading at below grade level proficiency, they're also at the same time being given extra credit for skipping school to protest Zionism and call for global jihad. Honestly, this sounds more like Gaza City than Los Angeles to me. Will this mark the end of American exceptionalism? I mean, what kind of future does an inculcated country with no capacity for independent thought really have?
It doesn't. You have to have independent thought. And I think, what was the line from Thomas Jefferson? The tree of liberty must be watered with the blood of free men, I think, fighting for that democracy. So, I mean, unfortunately, that is where we're at. I think that there is a major assault on American values, on American exceptionalism, on being exceptional on its own. So I have very real concerns. And unfortunately, again, I'm not a partisan person, but objectively looking at the parties, there are some problems on the Republican side with like Qatari influence and that kind of thing. But the kind of influence that we're seeing on the Democratic side is really scary, to the point that I don't know what American politics looks like. It's hard to predict from here on out. But all I can say is that these elections coming up are very important to vote. Yeah. But a country that has no independent thought cannot stand. And also Franklin said, what did he say? We've given you I often think about this actually. He said, we've given you a republic as long as you can keep it. And I just want, we've kept it maybe longer than he thought, but maybe we might have to fight a little harder now recently.
Yeah, that makes me sad. I actually wrote a Substack about this recently, about how everybody is starting to call this the American experiment. And the hypothesis seeming to be that it's failed. And that's really tragic. No matter, for all our flaws, there's never been a greater nation in the history of the universe, or I shouldn't say the universe, of the earth than America, which is why everybody wants to get here. This is the place. And Absolutely. So for all the good and for all the bad, there is no one, there is no other nation that shines on a hill like America. And to denigrate our exceptionalism is really I don't know what these people think comes next. That's what boggles my mind.
I'm the same. Yeah, I don't know.
I think that, I mean, to me, I'm curious what you think of this. To me, this all started, and I'm not saying this in retrospect. I saw the timeline. This started with Occupy Wall Street, which was a bunch of ignoramuses with no actual demands who thought that sitting on Wall Street so they could get free stuff.
Wealthy kids out, by the way, right, from Seattle.
Yeah. I think that mostly what's happened is that it's this entitlement of that by existing we deserve all the things that Bill Gates and whatever name the guy, Jeff Bezos, whatever, it doesn't matter, work so hard to earn.
Yep.
That somehow, if we moan and groan about it, that we can get that. That I think is the ultimate appeal of Mamdani, is he's like socialism, free food, free housing, free everything. And by the way, nothing is free. Nothing in the world is free. But these indoctrinated idiots don't understand that we've never had a socialist or a communist government that hasn't been a dictatorship. There's no other way to actually reallocate resources.
Yep.
I can't you're not going to give me your millions of dollars unless someone forces you to.
Right.
That's a dictatorship.
Yep.
So is that what they want? Do these people want to live with burqas under a dictatorship and pray to Allah? And like what do they think comes next? And it's yeah.
So I will say this. You know, we've done a lot of work since 10/7. By the way, one of the promises I made after 10/7 was that we would engage. And I'm proud to say that we're able to keep this. We're hopefully able to keep this promise today more than ever. That we would look for anybody who would try to undermine the U.S.'s relationship at any level of government, who were advancing pro-Hamas, this kind of crazy, extreme Palestinian positions. And a lot of this, by the way, so we looked at those people, and there are, believe it or not, and maybe this is easy to believe, but believe it or not, there are other policies that they all agree on. So things like taxing wealthy business, and their definition of wealthy is lower than what most people would think is wealthy. It is replacing streets with bicycle lanes. It is eliminating the production of energy, whether it's through fossil fuels or nuclear power or some other thing. So to me, it's almost like an anti-civilizational platform that these people are pushing. Because again, if you take a road and you replace a road with a bike lane, that's it. You're making it's not a decision about bike lanes. You're making an economic decision to say a recreational vehicle that only a healthy, non-disabled, unemployed, who can show up anywhere sweaty, can engage in that activity, but you're taking productive roadway from cars, making transport, families taking their children to school or whatever. So it really is, to me, it's an anti-civilizational kind of perspective. I don't understand it. I honestly think it's a mental illness. And it's frankly, it's the Democratic Party largely that is pushing this kind of these policies and perspectives. I see that as a California Democrat. There's a major problem here in the party.
Yeah. And I appreciate that. I'm an independent, so I'm happy to criticize both sides. Well, the thing that I've noted is that, is there a problem on both sides? Yes, but the bigger issue is that we're talking about the far right versus the entire left.
Correct.
And when I say the entire left, center has moved so far to the right, that the left, they seem to have blinders to this, and that's why Jewish people continue to vote for people who would just as soon see them dead just so that they could vote Democrat. And the woke need to wake. They really, really do. Yeah. So one thing that's interesting is that in this day and age, we find ourselves in this unique social dynamic. So right now, your average 3-year-old, right, can navigate tech better than his parents or grandparents. In a traditional family hierarchy, forget about who's trying to break it down, but just in a traditional hierarchy, knowledge and wisdom trickles down through the generations. But in the technology age, it trickles up as the older generations find themselves grasping for the sippy straws of relevancy that their children happen to own. So this wokeism trickles down from teachers to kids and then back up to the parents and grandparents who assume that those who understand the tech understand the world. And the result is not just woke babies, but woke families. I see this personally because I work with children with my mini yogis program, and it astounds me to see how the minds of parents and grandparents who should know better have turned to woke mush. Yeah. Everyone is being relentlessly bombarded these days with coercive doctrine. Our kids, their education, as we've discussed extensively, the media and social media all have the same exact messaging, and their parents are failing to contradict it. So our only hope is that children are going to take it upon themselves to educate themselves, to look beyond all these systems, to find truth. What is the chance of that happening? How many kids do we really expect this is going to happen to? And Dillon, I'm not sure if you even know this, but we have the blue wall, basically like the coast, which we live in like the bubbliest bubble here in Southern California.
Yeah.
I don't know if you know what's going on in middle America. I mean, Minnesota, Michigan, these are going to be outliers, but like just middle America, what is the indoctrination seeping in there as well? What do we see as the national pattern?
So I'm not super familiar with how this is spreading amongst families. I can tell you what I've seen just on an anecdotal basis. So I've seen a dynamic where what you've described, I think, is accurate. And I think a lot of the thing that maybe the relationship that the teachers are exploiting, and again, I don't have children, but I would imagine that, look, you love your kids, you send your kids to school, your kids come home, they say something, they've embraced something, they've embraced some idea, you want to listen to them, hear them out, what are you saying? And again, I have no place to criticize parents, but you're not, I can't imagine, like, you're not armed. Mm-hmm. You're not armed to deal with this kind of propaganda that's being fed to your kid in public schools to such a way that you would combat it. So maybe you inadvertently cultivate it, and so I think that there is a real assault on the family in that regard, and teachers are exploiting that relationship. On top of that, I would say that you hit the nail on the head. The remedy to this is stronger kids, stronger students. Mm-hmm. One of the things that we're thinking about at ICANN is how can we arm our students, not just with facts and information about Israel and the Middle East that they can challenge their teachers with, but also to arm them with the law. Mm-hmm. I had a situation recently, and I don't want to say where it was exactly because I don't want to put anybody in harm's way, but there was an assault in a public school campus. Somebody, a non-Jewish student, hit a Jewish student for being Jewish. There may have been some other circumstances, not entirely clear what was going on, but the mother called and said, well, what should I do? And I said, anytime there is an assault like that, what would you do if you were in the streets? You'd call 911. Mm-hmm. If you were standing on a sidewalk and someone whapped you upside the head, you'd call 911. Hey, this person assaulted me. If you're in a public school, that law still applies. Call 911, for example. So that's an extreme example, but we're trying to think about, ways that we can arm our students and arm the kids, not just to facts, but also their legal rights that they have on campus or in these schools, because the administration is also taking advantage, because guess what administrators don't want? They don't want complaints. Yep. So you've got activist teachers who are radicalizing their students being, I call it child abuse. To me, that's child abuse. And you want administrators who want it all to go away, and school board who wants to see none of it. So that's the dangerous dynamic that we're seeing within our public schools today. And again, to your point, ethnic studies is driving a lot of this extremism and radicalism.
I think that what I worry about is if 100% of the messaging that they're getting from every single channel is saying the same thing, what would ever make them stop and say, hey, maybe there's, I hate this other side of the story argument, because I don't even consider the Hamas side of the story to be valid.
No, it's facts versus disinformation, in my opinion.
Right. Yeah. But what would make them even say, like, is this correct? I mean, I'm hearing it from every single person. I hear it on my social media. I hear it on my media. I hear it from my teachers. My parents are parroting it. Like, what would ever make them think differently?
So, well, look, in some cases, they're not going to think differently, and they're going to become rabid Democratic voters, and maybe they'll be Democratic activists and run for Democratic office. But I think, look, in that scenario, the only thing that a kid or a student can look at is the reality. What is painted as reality in your classroom or amongst your peer group, when you come out into the real world, it's not the case. And in some cases, it is the case, because they craft the reality around them. So it's a precarious situation to be in. Yeah.
Okay. This is probably my last question.
All right.
Unless you really want to get out of tonight's event. When it comes to precariousness, the thing that's so scary about Zohran Mamdani, even from across the country, right? Because a lot of people are like, you're in Los Angeles, you have no say in what's going on in New York. Why do you care what's going on in New York? But as I mentioned before, what scares me is the fact that the lunatic fringe has gone mainstream. And what happens in New York does not stay in New York. And I am looking down with trepidation from the top of a very slippery slope. We now have an entire generation, preschool through grad school or whatever comes after grad school. What would you call like medical
Postdoc,
school
yeah.
and stuff? Postdoc.
Yeah.
Those. Now I'm really sounding like an idiot. They've been indoctrinated and radicalized their entire lives now. So this is not just against the Jews, but against America. So just circling back full circle to our home state of California, how many Zohran Mamdanis would you say we have in the California legislature? Do we have to worry?
So right now, I can tell you for sure there are at least 5 Mamdanis out of 120 in the California legislature. So the reason I can answer that is because we're actually running new technology that we've developed at ICANN to look at Mamdani-like officials across the country. We've run the California legislature. So I can tell you at least there's 5. Looking at the data, I suspect there might be more. We rank them, by the way, as to level 1, 2, and 3. There's one level 1 Mamdani, or sorry, one level 3 Mamdani who's very bad. His name is Alex Lee. He's from the Northern California area in San Francisco. And he has been echoing the remarks of like Rouhana over the past several weeks, maybe about recognizing a Palestinian state, just taking on major extreme positions. So at least within those 120, there's at least 5. I think there might be a couple more. We're going to also run the numbers at the local level as well. Within the city councils, there's more. There's at least 20 to 30 little Mamdanis within city councils across California. So at the very least.
I know that I think it was the DSA, it was somebody who said that they have 1,000 across the country who are ready to step into major positions, whether it's mayoral or state legislature or federal legislature. Yeah. This is something that I truly believe that anybody who cares, now we've really strayed, not just about the future of Jews in America, but about America, needs to really reckon with when we go to the ballot. I think that people don't take it seriously enough that when somebody like Mamdani says that he cannot condemn Hamas, don't assume that he can condemn Hamas. Listen to what these people are saying and think about what that means, not just for you, but for your neighbors, for your community, and really, honestly, even though that might be New York City, for the entire nation. My last question, I always like asking non-Jews this question. Okay. What does Am Yisrael Chai mean to you?
What does Am Yisrael Chai mean to me? That's a great question. To me, I guess it's an expression of my passion and love for Israel and the Jewish people. I guess, really. I mean, if I live in LA, I live near Beverly Hills, West Hollywood. If I see somebody with an Israeli shirt on or something, running, jogging, I'll say, "Am Yisrael Chai." And I want people to feel. It's also, by the way, it's also a declaration that we're together, right? That we're on the same side. Yeah. Also, yeah. And frankly, on the side of civilization. So not just that Israel lives or the people of Israel live, but we live together in the West, thankfully. So
that's a beautiful
kind of what it means
to me. So again, anybody who would like to find out more about Dillon's organization, ICANN. The link is in the show notes. But in the meantime, and I encourage you to support him and support his work, because his work is our work. But Dillon, is there anything else that I've missed that you'd like to add about your organization or about anything that I failed to?
Very comprehensive, interview. The thing that I would hammer home is state and local. We have 535 members of Congress, and AIPAC does an exceptional job of looking at those 535. And if you look at AIPAC in recent years, maybe, but certainly in recent months, they thankfully have had to get more aggressive with some of the opponents, lying about what AIPAC is and lying about what AIPAC does. So AIPAC has those 535. We trust them. They're good to go. There are, how many state legislators do you think there are across the country? We have 50 states, 50 state legislatures. How many state legislators? We have 120 in California. How many do you think we have nationwide?
I'm going to guess 3,423.
So there are 7,383 state legislators across the country.
Halfway there.
There's one state that is unicameral, so there are only 99 chambers. There's not 100, but that's Nebraska has a unicameral chamber. But there are 7,383 state legislators. Our hope is that by early 2026, we will have mapped all of them to see how many Mamdanis there are across the country at the state level. There are 19,500 mayors of major cities. We want to start with all those cities that passed a ceasefire resolution and see what's going on with those. There are about 135,000 city council members across the country of cities about 10,000 and up. And then there are around 80,000 school board members across the country. So altogether, there's about 250,000 state and local officials. There are many, many, many Mamdanis hiding there. So just pay attention to your state and local elections, even more than federal if you can, because we need to pay attention to who's on their way to Congress and who we need to stop early on. It's easier to stop a city council member running in West Hollywood than it is to stop a congressional candidate who has 10 years of experience behind them, who nobody paid attention to their position on Israel or Jews, and now they're in Congress. That's what we have. Okay. So we hope to fix that issue.
So now I have to ask
please,
another
please.
question.
Yeah.
I'm a rabid voter. I vote in every election.
Same, yeah.
However, I find it very, very hard to find any information. I literally am that person that scrubs the internet trying to find any kind of statement on the local and state candidates. A lot of times the booklet has blank pages, like they don't even bother putting out a statement. I don't even know how people win. But if I type in whatever, Tracy Park, obviously be good, Tracy Park, Israel, that's a bad example because you could actually find
She's phenomenal,
stuff.
by the way. We love your Tracy Park. You're
yes, that's the worst example, but she happens to be my girl. So,
she is. But
if you type in a candidate,
take one of her colleagues, Hugo Soto Martinez. That's one of her Tracy Park's.
Okay,
colleagues.
let's take him.
Yeah.
And I type in his name and his position. Forget about Israel. I don't know what he thinks about anything.
Correct.
So how do people, there's not debates at this level, there's not town halls at this level, there's no information in the electoral guides. A lot of them don't even have websites or Instagrams or anything that tell you anything about who they are. And I don't want to vote on party lines, particularly because I'm an independent. So how do you recommend that people who really do care about local elections vote responsibly when it's so hard to find information? I've called candidates and not gotten a call back.
So you have hit on exactly the problem, is that state and local is very hard to track. I gave you significant numbers of, those are offices, by the way. Those aren't, so imagine we have 7,383 offices at the state level. Multiply that at least by 5, and you'll have the slate of candidates for any, maybe you cut it in half and then multiply it by 5. And you'll have a slate of candidates for all the lower chambers, which are up every 2 years. That's a huge amount of people to try to track and try to understand, right? So that's probably around 25,000 people you'd have to understand if you were to look nationwide at just the state legislatures alone. And not easy to do. So we at ICANN are trying to address this issue. We put out voter guides. Certainly for Los Angeles, we put out voter guides to where if you trust us in our positions that we hold, we apply the same standard to the candidates that we support. On top of that, however, because of exactly what you said, we didn't plan this, by the way. This is
I've reached out to you and asked your voter guides, and you've told me I don't know anything about this person.
Yes. So we're trying to remedy that. And we've actually, it's not live just yet. But it's an asset that we're trying to build into early next year. It's literally called donotendorse.com, where we're going to put all the Mamdanis that we find around the country into donotendorse.com. Why do not endorse? Do you know what So when a political candidate is running for office, there are a few things that are very important. And this is totally off topic. We didn't plan any of this, by the way. But it's super important. It'll make a good clip.
Civics at 101.
There are 3 things that candidates need to win. The first thing that they need are votes. right? Because if you don't have votes, you're not going to win. So how do they get votes? From campaign contributions. How do you get campaign contributions? You start with endorsements. Endorsements are the way upstream asset that a candidate strives to get because they're also the cheapest to get. If I'm running for office and you're maybe a prominent community leader or a former elected official or a current elected official, I'll say, hey, can you please endorse me for my race? And I'm going to then turn that endorsement into cash. And then I turn that cash into votes. So we're trying to take the oxygen out of the room as it relates to endorsements first and foremost, because if a candidate does not get the endorsements that they need early on, they don't look viable. And so nobody gives them money. If nobody gives them money, then they can't put themselves out there. So donotendorse.com is going to be the asset that we're building. It'll be your resource to find which candidates to not endorse.
National or California?
National.
Okay.
So not to endorse, not to contribute to, and certainly not to vote for.
You should have told Kathy Hochul that.
We're not live yet. I don't think she had a choice. That's again, we're not trying to stop the current Mamdani. We're trying to stop the next Mamdanis that are downstream.
Yeah. Okay.
Now we can.
And no, I'm 50. And I also want to say that even as a Democrat, gerrymandering is not good politics.
Correct.
It's not honest. And I know that people are going to say, yeah, but they did it in Texas. Okay, we're not going to play that game of stooping to other people's level. We have 40% Republican in California, and they want to have 4 out of 54 seats. If you think that's fair and proportional and that gerrymandering is going to make this state more democratic, I think that, again, this is not fair play. And I think that more than anything, we all need to learn to play fair, respect each other, and understand that as Americans, we are all on the same team.
Absolutely agreed.
Does Love shake hands?
She does shake hands.
Oh my gosh. Hi, Love. Shake. Hello. And Dillon, thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Good to see you. Thanks to everybody for tuning in. Please do check out ICANN. Again, the URL is in the description. Have a great day, and Am Yisrael Chai.